It happened 3 minutes ago. The royal family, in an unprecedented joint statement, confirmed something that has sent shockwaves through Buckingham Palace and every corner of the globe. Prince Harry, the young prince once adored for his charm, his rebellious streak, and his seemingly unbreakable bond with his family, is now at the center of a storm more dangerous than any scandal the monarchy has faced in decades. He is under formal investigation. But why? What led the Met Police, in cooperation with foreign authorities, to focus their eyes on the very man who once seemed untouchable? And what does this mean for the monarchy, for national security, and for the man himself? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine the quiet halls of Buckingham Palace, usually a bastion of tradition and protocol, now buzzing with tension, whispers of betrayal, and hushed phone calls. King Charles and Queen Consort Camilla, usually reserved and measured in public, were said to be visibly shaken. Princess, and often the steely backbone of the family, reportedly broke protocol by convening a private emergency meeting with the palace's senior aides. Even Prince William, heir to the throne, whose public composure is legendary, was reportedly seen pacing the corridors of Kensington Palace, phone in hand, as if awaiting word that might never come. And all of it circles back to a single shocking allegation. Harry leaked classified royal security data to a tabloid during the turbulent months of his split from the firm. Think about that for a moment. Leaking classified information, not private family gossip, not minor indiscretions, real, sensitive information that could compromise the safety of the royal family. Security protocols, travel routes, private conversations, details that the monarchy depends on to remain untouchable, to remain secure. And it's Harry, once a golden boy, once the symbol of a modernizing monarchy, now allegedly the one who tore through those walls of secrecy. But what drove him to do it? Was it revenge? Was it carelessness? Was it a misguided attempt to control his own narrative? Or was it something even more calculated, more shocking than the public could imagine? What we know is that the investigation is thorough, international in scope, and relentless. The Met Police are combing through every device, every message, every email. Foreign authorities, from intelligence agencies who typically operate in secrecy, have reportedly joined the inquiry. They are piecing together a puzzle that stretches from London to the United States, and perhaps beyond. Now, you might be asking yourself, hasn't Harry always had a complicated relationship with the monarchy? The public has seen the Prince of Sussex as a man torn between loyalty and independence, between royal duty and personal freedom. We've followed his every move. From his military service to his high-profile marriage, from the Oprah interview that shook the world to the Netflix deals that promised financial freedom and global influence. But nothing in the public eye has prepared anyone for the gravity of these latest revelations. Because this isn't about opinions or rumors. This is about formal investigations, legal consequences, and the very security of the family that raised him. Let's rewind for a moment and consider the timeline. In early 2020, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle made the announcement that would redefine the modern monarchy. They would step back from their royal duties. The world reacted with a mixture of shock, admiration, and curiosity. But behind the headlines, tension brewed. Insiders reported whispers of friction, disagreements about financial independence, media strategy, and even concerns about personal safety. Security briefings, once routine and handled quietly by palace aides, were now being questioned. The balance between public engagement and private security became precarious. And it was during this exact period, according to investigators, that Harry allegedly began sharing information that was never meant for the public eye. We must pause and consider the implications. Royal security is not a mere formality. It is a carefully constructed system of protocols, contingency plans, and intelligence coordination. Every movement is calculated, every detail documented, every risk analyzed. The royal family is not just a family, it is a symbol of national stability. Compromising its security is not a personal betrayal. It is a potential threat to the monarchy itself. And if what the investigators are suggesting is true, Harry's actions could have put lives at risk, not just his own, but the safety of those closest to him, and perhaps even broader national interests. Of course, the public has seen Harry in many lights. The charming prince, the doting husband, the devoted father, the adventurer, the rebel. But the man at the center of this investigation is not a public persona. He is a private individual, and private actions have consequences. Did Harry understand the gravity of his alleged leaks? Or did he believe he could control the narrative, as he has so often tried to do, without ever truly risking fallout? These are questions that investigators are now asking, and questions the world is desperate to see answered. Meanwhile, Buckingham Palace has moved cautiously but decisively. Sources suggest that formal discussions between King Charles, Queen Consort Camilla, and the palace's security and legal teams began immediately after preliminary findings were presented. There are rumors that Harry was warned multiple times, informally at first, to cease sharing sensitive information. And yet, the alleged leaks continued. How did it come to this? How did a prince, once celebrated for bravery and loyalty, allegedly cross a line that no other member of the royal family had dared? The media, of course, has seized upon every fragment of information. Headlines are exploding with phrases like Prince Harry under investigation, royal security breach, and monarchy shaken by Sussex scandal. Social media is ablaze. Some are defending Harry, citing personal freedom, autonomy, and mental health struggles. Others are outraged, emphasizing duty, loyalty, and the sacred trust between a prince and his country. It is a debate that cuts across generations, across borders, and even across political lines. And yet, amid the public frenzy, a quieter, more alarming story unfolds behind closed doors. Investigators are reportedly combing through Harry's personal devices, tracing communications that may extend beyond the tabloids. Foreign intelligence teams are scrutinizing connections that could suggest the leaks were not merely opportunistic, but part of a pattern. The palace is said to be coordinating with legal and security experts to anticipate every possible scenario. For a family that has weathered wars, scandals, and revolutions, this is territory unlike anything they have faced. Now, here's where it gets even more compelling. Those closest to the investigation have reportedly described a sense of disbelief. How could Harry, known for his dedication to family, his military service, his public charity work, risk everything in this way? Why would someone who once spoke passionately about protecting his family's legacy allegedly compromise it so dramatically? And most importantly, what will happen next? Will the investigation lead to formal charges? Will there be internal consequences, public fallout, or even exile from royal duties? The answers, for now, remain just out of reach. But what we do know is this: the story is far from over. Every message uncovered, every witness interviewed, every secret document reviewed could tilt the balance. And as this investigation unfolds, the world watches with bated breath, wondering not only about the fate of one prince, but about the very future of the monarchy itself. So, as we dive deeper into this tale of trust, betrayal, and unprecedented scandal, I want you to ask yourself, what would you do if the person you trusted most with your secrets, your security, and your family legacy turned against you? How far could someone go when ambition, fear, and desperation collide? And most importantly, what shocking revelations are still waiting to be uncovered? Ones that could change everything you think you know about Prince Harry and the royal family? But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. For months, Prince Harry moved through life as if nothing could touch him. Public appearances, charity events, and media interviews all painted a picture of a man in control, even at a distance from the firm. He laughed with celebrities, shared glimpses of his family life, and seemed at peace. Or at least, that's what the world saw. But behind the perfectly curated images, whispers in the palace corridors hinted at a tension that few outside those walls could comprehend. Imagine walking through the gilded halls of Kensington Palace, the air thick with secrets, corridors lined with portraits of kings and queens long gone, each face silently witnessing the unfolding drama. The staff, many of whom had served generations, had begun to notice subtle shifts. Harry's aides becoming more guarded, private briefings growing longer, messages marked urgent and encrypted. Something was brewing, but no one knew how quickly it would escalate into a full-blown crisis. The calm before the storm is often the most deceptive. To the public, Harry was thriving, even liberated. Freed from the constraints of traditional royal duty, he traveled to California, attended high-profile events, and cultivated a persona of modern independence. But in private, sources suggest he was increasingly isolated, increasingly frustrated, and increasingly willing to act outside the boundaries that had once defined him. The very freedom he sought came with consequences he may have underestimated. How could someone so adored, so meticulously raised within the monarchy, reach a point where betrayal becomes a real possibility? Was it resentment? Was it fear? Or was it something darker, a reckless desire to control the narrative at any cost? Every anecdote from staff, friends, and palace insiders paints a picture of a man caught between loyalty and rebellion, and the lines between those two forces were becoming dangerously blurred. To understand the gravity of what came next, it helps to look back at Harry's life leading up to this point. From his early days in the royal nursery to his military service, he was taught duty, discretion, and loyalty. Every action, every decision was scrutinized not just by the family, but by the public. Yet, paradoxically, the same upbringing instilled in him a sense of individuality, a need to carve his own path. It was a delicate balance, one that appeared to hold, until cracks began to form. The first cracks weren't immediately obvious. A miscommunication here, a disagreement with an aide there. But over time, those small fissures widened. Some insiders describe moments of frustration during private briefings, times when Harry would question protocol or challenge advice. Others hint at tension over media coverage, an obsession with controlling how his story was told, how his image appeared to the world. Consider this. The same man who championed causes like mental health awareness and veteran support could allegedly compromise national security. It seems contradictory. How could someone so conscious of public perception risk the very trust placed in him by his family and country? Yet, that contradiction lies at the heart of the investigation. People are left asking, did he understand what he was doing, or did he truly believe he could manipulate the system without consequences? Palace insiders have described a growing unease during this period. Security personnel noticed Harry's interactions with certain media figures were more frequent, more discreet. Some messages flagged for review hinted at sensitive information, though initial evaluations dismissed them as harmless. But the cumulative effect, investigators now suggest, was anything but harmless. It was the beginning of a chain reaction that would soon ignite one of the most explosive scandals in recent royal history. At the same time, Harry's relationship with Meghan Markle added layers of complexity. The couple shared a vision for life outside traditional royal confines, including charitable work, media projects, and personal branding. Publicly, they projected confidence, unity, and ambition. Privately, insiders suggest there were moments of tension, decisions about travel security, disagreements on strategy, and occasional clashes with palace advisors. Could these personal pressures have contributed to Harry's alleged decision to leak sensitive information? Could it have been an attempt to assert control or signal independence? The timing is key. These alleged leaks coincided with the period when Harry and Meghan were navigating their split from official duties, trying to establish a new life abroad, and dealing with intense media scrutiny. It was a time of vulnerability, both personal and logistical. When pressure mounts, people act unpredictably. When security and secrecy collide with ambition and frustration, even a small action can spiral into catastrophe. There were also whispers of a deeper internal struggle. Harry, often portrayed as confident and outspoken, reportedly wrestled with guilt, anxiety, and fear. Sources close to him suggest he was haunted by past mistakes, worried about public perception, and increasingly willing to bend or break rules to maintain control over his narrative. Every decision, every interaction seemed calculated, but with unintended consequences lurking around every corner. It's also important to note the culture within the palace. Traditionally, there is a strict hierarchy and clear expectations regarding loyalty and discretion. Staff, security personnel, and aides operate with meticulous attention to detail, often under immense pressure. The idea of a royal family member allegedly circumventing these systems would have been unthinkable. Yet, according to investigators, the very protocols designed to protect the family were allegedly compromised, bit by bit, through a combination of small breaches and strategic leaks. The public, of course, remains largely unaware of these behind-the-scenes tensions. What they see is a media-friendly prince, attending events, engaging in charitable work, and speaking with confidence about his personal projects. But the truth is far more complicated. Every public smile, every carefully curated photo, masked an underlying storm. A storm that, as we now know, was building towards an unprecedented scandal. It raises a question: can one person, even a prince, truly act against the system without consequences? For years, the monarchy has survived scandals, missteps, and rebellions. Yet, this situation feels different. It is not just a story of personal choices or public perception. It is a story that touches the very foundation of trust, loyalty, and security. The actions of one man, seemingly so small and calculated at the time, are now under scrutiny on a scale that could reshape the royal institution itself. As the world watches, the question lingers: when did the calm before the storm truly end? When did Prince Harry cross the threshold from independence to betrayal? And what signs, hidden in plain sight, were missed by those closest to him? Staff, advisors, and family members reportedly had inklings of trouble but never anticipated the full extent. How could they have known that the next wave would involve classified security data, international attention, and a formal investigation that threatens to alter the monarchy forever? Every detail matters. Every private message, every meeting, every discreet conversation becomes a puzzle piece. Investigators are now tracing Harry's actions with precision, trying to connect the dots between his personal choices and the potential risks posed. And what they are uncovering is said to be more shocking than anyone imagined. Reports describe sequences of communications and interactions that suggest a level of deliberation and intent far beyond what casual observers might assume. Yet, even amidst these revelations, contradictions emerge. Harry's public persona emphasizes loyalty, honor, and protection of his family. His private actions, as alleged, hint at manipulation, secrecy, and disregard for protocol. This tension between the man the public adores and the man under investigation is central to the story. It is also what makes this narrative so compelling, so unpredictable, and so deeply human. As we move forward, it is critical to understand that the calm before the storm was never truly calm. Every smile, every speech, every media appearance was layered with tension, anticipation, and a hidden struggle. What appeared to be freedom and independence may have been a prelude to choices that would shock the world, destabilize the palace, and redefine Harry's legacy. And just as the storm was about to break, insiders report a moment that would signal the tipping point. A private meeting, an intercepted message, a warning that went unheeded. What happened in that moment would set in motion events that no one, not even Harry himself, could have fully predicted. The calm had ended. The storm was imminent. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The investigation revealed something that sent chills through the palace and security personnel alike. A series of messages, carefully concealed, that allegedly contained sensitive royal information. At first glance, they seemed innocuous, friendly exchanges, casual updates, mundane logistical notes. But as investigators dug deeper, a troubling pattern emerged. These messages were not just casual communication. They were potentially a roadmap to vulnerabilities, a breadcrumb trail that could compromise the safety of the royal family. Imagine the meticulous work of sifting through hundreds, possibly thousands, of encrypted messages, each one a thread in a web that might expose the most guarded secrets of a centuries-old institution. Every timestamp, every recipient, every carefully chosen word could reveal more than Harry intended. And it wasn't just what was said, it was what was implied, what was suggested, and, in some cases, what was deliberately left unsaid. How could such messages go unnoticed by aides and security personnel? In theory, every device issued to a royal family member is monitored, every communication encrypted, every line of correspondence flagged if it deviates from protocol. Yet these messages allegedly slipped through. Were they truly sophisticated enough to evade scrutiny? Or was there a lapse in judgment, a moment of overconfidence by a prince who had always believed he could outmaneuver the system? The content of these messages, investigators suggest, spans multiple months during the period when Harry and Meghan were negotiating their independence from the monarchy. Details included itinerary changes, security arrangements, travel plans, and even private discussions about staff assignments. To the trained eye, this is not just information, it is actionable intelligence. And when shared outside the palace walls, it becomes a potential liability of unprecedented magnitude. Consider the human factor. Even the most disciplined individuals can make mistakes under pressure. Sources say that Harry was increasingly frustrated with the constraints of royal life, the constant scrutiny, and the media narrative that he had little control over. Could that frustration have fueled a sense of invincibility, a belief that sharing these details with trusted media contacts would somehow serve his interests without endangering anyone? Perhaps, but the evidence now suggests that this confidence may have been dangerously misplaced. And then there's the question of motivation. Why would Harry risk everything by leaking this information? Was it a form of retaliation against the monarchy for perceived slights? A bid for autonomy and control over his public image? Or was it part of a more calculated strategy to secure influence in the media and entertainment world while retaining ties to his royal identity? The investigators are not only trying to answer these questions. They are trying to anticipate what he might do next and whether any further breaches have occurred or could occur. One of the most alarming aspects of these messages is the level of precision with which sensitive information was shared. Investigators point to specific instances where security schedules, private travel arrangements, and internal communications were referenced in ways that could be traced and exploited. Even minor oversights, such as revealing the presence of certain personnel at private locations, could create vulnerabilities. The implications are staggering. These weren't careless mistakes. They were allegedly deliberate acts with real-world consequences. And yet, there are contradictions. Harry, the same prince who once championed mental health and personal responsibility, is now at the center of allegations that portray him as reckless, impulsive, and potentially disloyal. How do we reconcile these conflicting images? Is it possible for someone to be both a loving father and spouse and, at the same time, a figure whose actions could compromise the security of an entire institution? The answer, it seems, is yes, but only if the motivations and pressures are understood in context. Insiders describe moments of tension in which Harry appeared increasingly isolated. Security teams and palace aides recount instances where he was difficult to reach, where briefings were postponed, and where messages went unanswered, or worse, selectively shared. The atmosphere was fraught with uncertainty. Who could be trusted? What could be believed? And every unanswered question added fuel to a fire that was already beginning to burn out of control. There's also the human drama of loyalty and betrayal. Family members, advisors, and aides are caught in a delicate balancing act. Protect the institution, protect the family, and yet navigate the actions of a prince whose decisions are now under investigation. How do you confront a family member who may be acting against the very systems that keep everyone safe? How do you maintain trust when one of your own is allegedly undermining everything? These are the ethical and emotional dilemmas that the palace is grappling with. And the messages themselves, though digital, are not just data, they tell a story. They reveal patterns of thought, priorities, and perhaps even intent. Some messages reportedly hinted at dissatisfaction with the pace of change in the monarchy, while others allegedly suggested frustration with media coverage that he felt misrepresented him and his family. Investigators note a pattern of selective disclosure, choosing which details to share, with whom, and under what conditions. It is strategic, calculated, and deeply troubling. But it's not just the content, it's the ripple effect. The discovery of these messages has implications beyond Harry alone. Security teams must reassess protocols, advisors must revisit contingency plans, and family members must confront the emotional reality of betrayal. For a family whose public image is synonymous with stability, the revelation that one member may have intentionally leaked classified information is devastating. Consider the broader context. In an era where media scrutiny is relentless and every move is captured and analyzed, the stakes for the monarchy have never been higher. A single misstep can cascade into global headlines, political ramifications, and questions about the relevance and resilience of royal institutions. The alleged leaks, therefore, are not just a private matter. They are a potential international crisis. And yet, even amid this storm, there are moments of tension and irony. How could someone so educated in the principles of security and loyalty allegedly act in a way that undermines both? How could a man who has consistently been celebrated for courage and leadership become the focal point of a crisis that threatens the very system that nurtured him? It is this contradiction, this collision between public persona and private action, that makes the story so gripping, so shocking, and so impossible to look away from. As investigators continue to analyze the messages, new questions keep surfacing. Were these isolated incidents, or part of a pattern of behavior? How far did the leaks extend? Were there other collaborators, other intermediaries, or other channels used to transmit information? The palace may never fully disclose the answers, but the public, and the world, waits with bated breath. And here's where it becomes even more startling. Some sources indicate that certain messages suggested knowledge of international travel arrangements that, if exposed, could have compromised personal security abroad. Imagine a scenario where a prince's private itinerary, intended to be known only to a select security team, becomes accessible to outsiders. The risks are immediate and severe. Lives could be endangered, plans disrupted, and public trust shattered. This isn't mere speculation. Investigators describe the messages as potentially actionable intelligence. Each one is analyzed for content, context, and intent. Each could reveal vulnerabilities, create opportunities for exploitation, or demonstrate premeditation. And the deeper they dig, the more concerning the patterns appear to be. And yet, Harry's public image remains resilient to some degree. To casual observers, he continues to be seen as the charming, rebellious prince with a cause. But the truth, hidden behind encrypted texts and secure communications, tells a different story, one of risk, calculation, and potentially reckless ambition. So, as we peel back the layers of this scandal, the audience must ask themselves, how much can you really know about someone based solely on their public persona? And what would you do if you discovered that the person you trusted most with secrets, safety, and loyalty was allegedly acting in ways that could imperil everything you hold dear? The messages are only the beginning. Each one is a thread in a larger narrative of intrigue, betrayal, and revelation. And as investigators continue to unravel the story, it becomes clear that what was revealed in these private communications is far more significant than anyone could have anticipated. But what investigators uncovered next, hidden files, coded messages, and unexplained contacts, would send shockwaves not only through the palace but across the globe. And no one saw it coming. The world knows the tabloids as relentless, as intrusive, as merciless. They chase celebrities, politicians, and public figures, turning private lives into public spectacle. For decades, the royal family has navigated this landscape carefully, balancing privacy with unavoidable scrutiny. But during the period of Harry and Meghan's gradual separation from the monarchy, the relationship with the press took on a far more complicated, almost dangerous edge. According to investigators, Harry allegedly handed over more than anecdotes or emotional interviews. He allegedly provided data that was both sensitive and highly compromising. The first signs were subtle. Small details leaked here, minor inaccuracies there. Perhaps an itinerary, a glimpse of a security detail, or a casual comment about private engagements. On their own, these would have seemed trivial. But investigators now suggest they were part of a calculated pattern, a series of disclosures designed to influence media narratives while simultaneously advancing personal agendas. Each innocent tidbit carried risk. Each published story, backed by sensitive information, eroded the boundaries that protect the monarchy. Imagine the chain reaction. A seemingly harmless revelation in a tabloid could force a security reevaluation, alter travel plans, and put the royal household into high alert. This was not theoretical. Sources say palace security teams were increasingly on edge, tasked with responding to leaks while trying to maintain normal operations. Staff described a tension that was tangible, almost electric, as they realized the potential consequences of each story hitting the presses. The choice of media outlets is telling. Investigators are reportedly examining communications with specific tabloid journalists who had access to sensitive information. Why these particular outlets? Why now? Experts suggest it may have been strategic, reaching platforms with maximum visibility and influence, capable of shaping public perception at a moment when Harry's independence from the firm was under intense scrutiny. The stakes were not just reputational, they were operational. Security analysts have pointed out that leaks of this kind, when coordinated with timing and content, could provide more than fodder for gossip. They could compromise movement, reveal vulnerabilities, or even endanger lives. Each story published with inside information was potentially a breach of protocols that the monarchy relies on to ensure safety. And while the public consumed the drama with fascination, the palace watched nervously, aware that the consequences of these disclosures extended far beyond headlines. Yet, there is irony here. Harry, the same prince who had been vocal about media harassment, who championed causes related to mental health and personal well-being, allegedly chose to use that same media ecosystem as a vehicle to disclose information that was intended to be protected. He had fought against tabloids for years, fought to protect family members, and yet now, according to investigators, he was contributing to the very force he had long criticized. How do we reconcile this contradiction? Is it revenge, strategy, carelessness, or something more profound? There is also the psychological angle. People under stress act unpredictably. Sources suggest that Harry felt cornered, scrutinized, and misunderstood. The split from the firm, the global media spotlight, and the pressures of parenting in public created a perfect storm of anxiety and urgency. Could it be that the leaks were an attempt to reclaim agency, to push back against a narrative he felt was constricting, or was it a calculated gambit to influence the public discourse and strengthen his independence? The fallout from the first few leaks was immediate. Tabloid stories spread across the UK and the US, social media amplified them, and public opinion began to polarize. Some praised Harry for speaking his truth, while others condemned him for recklessness and disloyalty. Memes, op-eds, and editorials exploded with opinions, each trying to parse fact from fiction, intent from consequence. But behind the headlines, security teams were quietly recalibrating, aware that the leaks were more than sensational stories. They were potential vulnerabilities. One of the most astonishing aspects of this scandal is the level of premeditation investigators allege. The stories were not haphazard. Patterns in the timing, content, and choice of outlets suggest deliberate coordination. Every piece of information, every detail, every narrative had the potential to serve a purpose beyond public consumption. Some insiders describe it as a chess game, with Harry as a player who might have underestimated the reach of his moves. There are also questions about loyalty and trust. A royal, after all, is not just a figurehead. They are a symbol of stability and security. Staff, aides, and security personnel rely on the family to uphold the integrity of confidential information. Allegedly leaking details to the tabloids breaks that trust, and yet Harry's public persona complicates the narrative. How do you condemn a man for self-expression while understanding the pressures and scrutiny he faces? The contradictions deepen the intrigue, making the scandal as much psychological as procedural. The palace's response was measured, but deliberate. Advisors and security teams reportedly reviewed every interaction with media outlets, identifying the scope of potentially sensitive disclosures. Legal teams considered ramifications, both domestic and international, for breaches that could be construed as endangering the royal family. Every day, every published story added urgency to the investigation. Every article became a piece of evidence, every headline a potential clue. But it wasn't only the palace that reacted. Foreign authorities took notice as well. The investigation revealed that some of the leaked details had implications beyond the UK, potentially affecting international travel, diplomatic engagements, and security protocols abroad. Intelligence agencies, usually operating quietly, began to monitor connections, patterns, and recipients of the leaked information. Harry's actions, it seems, may have inadvertently pulled international scrutiny into what was initially a domestic family matter. And the human element cannot be overstated. Sources describe the emotional toll on palace staff who had long served the family faithfully. The sense of betrayal, anxiety, and frustration is palpable. People who had dedicated decades of service suddenly found themselves navigating a crisis of unprecedented complexity. Their loyalty was tested, their discretion strained, and their sense of stability shaken. How do you protect a family when one of its own allegedly undermines the very systems you depend on? Meanwhile, the public perception narrative became even more complicated. Social media amplified speculation, conspiracy theories flourished, and online communities debated Harry's motives relentlessly. Some argued he was a victim of intense scrutiny, unfairly targeted by the firm. Others claimed his actions were calculated, reckless, and deeply irresponsible. The truth, as always, is somewhere in between, and the investigation seeks to uncover it. And yet, even amidst the chaos, contradictions emerge. Harry, a man widely celebrated for courage, empathy, and leadership, allegedly participated in actions that compromised security and trust. How does one reconcile a person's positive qualities with decisions that, if true, could be interpreted as reckless or disloyal? Is it possible that his intentions were misunderstood, or does the evidence suggest something more troubling? As the tabloid stories continued to surface, investigators reportedly began mapping patterns, tracing every detail, every connection. The goal was clear: identify what was disclosed, understand the intent, and determine the scope of the risk. Each revelation, each publication, became both a clue and a threat. And as this process unfolded, Palace insiders prepared for consequences that could be both public and private. But just when it seemed the scandal was confined to the tabloids, something unexpected happened. An internal discovery that suggested the leaks were deeper, more coordinated, and potentially far-reaching than anyone anticipated. And what came next would escalate the crisis beyond media scrutiny and into the heart of international concern. As the first reports of the leaks reached Buckingham Palace, the Met Police and Palace security teams sprang into action. But what started as a straightforward inquiry into unauthorized disclosures quickly became an investigation of unprecedented complexity. What investigators uncovered was not a series of isolated mistakes, but an intricate web of communications, digital traces, and subtle signals that suggested intent, premeditation, and perhaps deliberate defiance of royal protocols. Imagine an elite team of officers, analysts, and palace aides working together, meticulously combing through encrypted emails, private chats, and personal devices. Each piece of data was examined not just for content, but for context, timing, and possible implications. Who received it? When was it sent? Was it altered, deleted, or forwarded? Every question mattered, because the smallest oversight could reveal a thread that would unravel the entire narrative. The first breakthrough came when investigators identified a pattern in the messages that aligned with certain tabloid publications. What had initially appeared to be coincidental leaks now suggested deliberate coordination. There were timestamps matching the release of news stories, phrasing that mirrored private correspondence, and subtle references only insiders could recognize. The picture that emerged was deeply concerning. Someone with intimate knowledge of royal security arrangements was possibly sharing information with external parties. But it wasn't just the domestic implications that alarmed authorities. Foreign intelligence teams became involved after realizing that some of the leaked details pertained to international travel and private engagements abroad. Coordinating across borders, investigators sought to understand the full extent of the exposure. Was this an isolated breach? Or was it part of a more systematic series of disclosures with potentially serious global ramifications? The collaboration between the Met Police and foreign authorities marked an escalation rarely seen in royal investigations, underscoring the severity of the situation. Sources familiar with the investigation describe an atmosphere of tension and urgency. Every day, analysts pieced together fragments of evidence, reconstructing timelines and identifying patterns. They traced IP addresses, examined metadata, and even conducted forensic analysis on devices believed to have contained sensitive communications. The process was painstaking, methodical, and exhaustive. Yet even with all this work, the investigators were dealing with a moving target. A prince who was highly media-savvy, technologically adept, and familiar with the palace's own protocols. One surprising aspect revealed during this phase was the level of sophistication in the alleged leaks. Investigators noted that the information shared wasn't random. It was precise, targeted, and often timed for maximum impact. Some messages suggested knowledge of private meetings, upcoming public engagements, and personnel assignments, details that, if misused, could compromise both the family and security arrangements. The implications were staggering. This was no longer just a scandal about publicity or personal conflict. It was about potential breaches of national security. And yet, contradictions continued to emerge. Harry's public image remained largely untarnished in certain circles, celebrated as a forward-thinking, modernizing prince. Privately, however, investigators reportedly observed behaviors inconsistent with this image, moments of secrecy, selective sharing of information, and strategic attempts to influence narratives. This duality, the tension between public persona and private conduct, made the investigation all the more complex. How could someone who embodies loyalty, empathy, and responsibility allegedly act in ways that could destabilize the very institution he is part of? As the investigation progressed, investigators reportedly discovered attempts to obscure traces of communication. Deleted messages, encrypted files, and devices wiped of data suggested not only awareness of scrutiny, but potentially a deliberate effort to conceal evidence. Yet, even these attempts left digital fingerprints, subtle indicators that analysts were trained to detect. Each discovery added urgency, a sense of gravity, and a growing realization. The stakes were higher than anyone initially imagined. Legal advisors, both domestic and international, were soon consulted to determine the implications of the findings. If the allegations were proven, they would not only affect Harry personally, but could also have broader ramifications for the monarchy. The legal landscape was complex. Breaches of confidentiality, potential violations of national security law, and the delicate balance between private family matters and public accountability all intersected in ways that had rarely been tested. The human element of the investigation added another layer of drama. Sources described senior palace aides as torn between loyalty to the family and professional duty. Security teams, many of whom had served generations, were grappling with the emotional reality that one of their own, a prince they had known intimately, might have knowingly endangered them. The combination of personal betrayal, professional responsibility, and public scrutiny created a pressure cooker environment. But even as investigators worked tirelessly, the narrative was far from linear. New evidence appeared in waves, each revelation contradicting previous assumptions. What was once thought to be an isolated series of leaks evolved into a sprawling network of potential disclosures. Each revelation demanded immediate attention, careful analysis, and strategic decision-making. The palace's response had to be measured, yet swift, a delicate balance in a high-stakes environment where every misstep could escalate the crisis. Among the more alarming findings were the indications that some of the leaks might have been orchestrated with an understanding of media dynamics. Investigators reportedly found correlations between certain messages and peak news cycles, suggesting that timing was intentional, designed to maximize exposure. This raised troubling questions. Was this a spontaneous act, or was it premeditated strategy? Were the leaks motivated by frustration, or were they calculated moves to control the narrative? And most importantly, who else, if anyone, was complicit? Insiders indicate that these discoveries prompted urgent meetings among top advisors. King Charles, Queen Consort Camilla, and senior palace officials reportedly convened multiple times in emergency sessions to evaluate the scope of the risk and consider next steps. Contingency plans were drafted, legal options explored, and potential public communications rehearsed. For a family that usually operates with discretion and poise, the need for rapid decision-making under intense scrutiny was unprecedented. Throughout this investigation, emotional tension remained high. Staff members, advisors, and security personnel were navigating a mixture of loyalty, fear, and disbelief. How do you protect a family when one of its own may have compromised its security? How do you reconcile affection for a family member with the necessity of enforcing accountability? These questions became central to the unfolding drama, highlighting not just the procedural aspects of the investigation, but the human cost of betrayal. Even as investigators pieced together the puzzle, the public remained largely unaware of the behind-the-scenes developments. Social media speculations, media reports, and celebrity commentary dominated headlines. But the real work, the painstaking forensic analysis, the confidential briefings, and the intense scrutiny, remained hidden. And that secrecy, necessary for operational integrity, only amplified curiosity, speculation, and tension among those who followed the story from afar. But then came a development that changed the trajectory entirely. During a routine device analysis, investigators reportedly uncovered something unexpected, a set of communications that suggested not only intent, but potential coordination with parties outside the immediate royal circle. These messages hinted at a complexity and reach previously unimagined, raising urgent questions about trust, motivation, and the possibility of further undiscovered leaks. And that's when the palace realized the true scale of the storm. This was no longer just a story about a few misdirected messages or tabloid stories. This was an investigation that could alter reputations, relationships, and perhaps the very structure of the monarchy itself. Every new piece of evidence brought fresh challenges, intensified scrutiny, and heightened tension. But what investigators discovered next, the connections between these messages and undisclosed contacts outside the country, would elevate the crisis from an internal scandal to an international concern. And no one could have predicted the shock that was about to follow. The royal family prides itself on tradition, discretion, and composure. For centuries, the corridors of power have been filled with whispers of scandal, intrigue, and delicate maneuvering. But nothing prepared them for the shock that Prince Harry, once their beloved son, brother, and nephew, allegedly compromised their most sacred protocols. Sources inside the palace describe a wave of tension so palpable that even routine meetings felt like high-stakes negotiations. Staff members whispered in hallways, security personnel doubled their vigilance, and aides who had served the family for decades reportedly felt their sense of stability vanish almost overnight. King Charles, often seen as a calm and measured figure, is said to have convened emergency sessions with senior advisors as soon as preliminary findings reached him. The gravity of the situation demanded immediate action. Every piece of evidence was scrutinized, every message analyzed, and every potential consequence considered. According to insiders, the king's private deliberations were intense, marked by both frustration and heartbreak. The betrayal was not merely procedural, it was personal. A son who had once symbolized hope and continuity now seemed at the center of a crisis that threatened both family and institution. Queen Consort Camilla reportedly shared the same mixture of concern and disbelief. Sources describe moments of tension during palace briefings, where advisors would present the scope of the leaks and the potential risks. Every revelation added to a sense of urgency and betrayal. Staff members, normally accustomed to handling crises with poise, found themselves navigating a landscape fraught with fear, loyalty conflicts, and unprecedented uncertainty. How do you respond to a threat that comes not from outside, but from within your own family? Princess Anne, long regarded as the stoic and disciplined pillar of the monarchy, took a proactive stance. According to insiders, she demanded immediate oversight of communications, security, and investigative measures. Her involvement was critical. She understood the stakes and the need for both precision and discretion. The palace, accustomed to carefully measured responses, was suddenly operating in an accelerated and high-pressure environment, where every decision carried far-reaching consequences. Even Prince William, heir to the throne and Harry's older brother, reportedly reacted with a mix of disbelief and controlled fury. While publicly maintaining composure, insiders suggest he was deeply concerned about the implications of the leaks. Not just for security, but for the reputation of the monarchy and the future of the institution he would one day lead. The tension between private emotions and public duty added a layer of complexity, as William had to balance familial concern with institutional responsibility. The staff, many of whom had served the royal family for decades, described a pervasive atmosphere of unease. Daily routines were disrupted. Security checks became more rigorous. Briefings were longer, more detailed, and fraught with tension. The palace's normally precise operations were now under strain, as personnel struggled to adapt to the reality of a prince allegedly compromising the very systems they depended on. And yet, contradictions persisted. Harry, in public appearances, continued to project confidence, charisma, and even normalcy. To the casual observer, nothing seemed amiss. But behind closed doors, the palace was navigating a complex web of betrayal, uncertainty, and the looming question of what actions were necessary to protect both the family and the institution. How do you maintain normalcy when the foundation of trust has been shaken? How do you safeguard an entire lineage when one of its key members may have endangered it? Internal communications reportedly became intense and frequent. Advisors, legal teams, and security personnel coordinated around the clock, analyzing every piece of evidence, mapping connections, and preparing for contingencies. Every new revelation about Harry's alleged leaks required rapid reassessment of security measures, travel plans, and internal protocols. The palace's operational rhythm, carefully honed over centuries, was now disrupted by the uncertainty of internal compromise. Sources describe emotional tension that was almost tangible. Loyal staff members grappled with feelings of anger, fear, and betrayal, while also trying to maintain composure and protect the family's public image. The palace, usually a symbol of unwavering stability, faced a crisis that was deeply personal, organizational, and public all at once. The emotional stakes were as high as the procedural ones. The media, too, played a role in amplifying the shockwaves. Even as the palace worked to assess the situation internally, every leaked detail, every rumor, and every speculation fueled public curiosity and scrutiny. Social media discussions, op-eds, and news coverage created a feedback loop, increasing pressure on both the royal family and investigators. It was a delicate balance. Respond too openly, and the scandal intensifies. Respond too quietly, and the narrative could spiral out of control. And then came the strategic deliberations. Advisors reportedly debated whether to issue public statements, restrict Harry's communications, or take legal action. The stakes were immense. Any move could affect the monarchy's credibility, the security of the family, and the perception of Harry's actions. The palace had to weigh emotional impulses against institutional imperatives, a task that demanded extraordinary precision under immense pressure. Within the palace walls, relationships were strained. Trust, once implicit, now required reevaluation. Staff who had worked alongside Harry found themselves questioning interactions, reassessing loyalties, and navigating an environment where personal and professional boundaries were blurred. The human cost of alleged betrayal was palpable. Anxiety, confusion, and a sense of vulnerability permeated the royal household. And yet, the irony remained. A prince who had once been celebrated for his courage, independence, and loyalty now faced allegations that cast doubt on every aspect of his behavior. The duality was striking: public hero, private liability, charismatic figure, potential security threat. How does a family reconcile the image of a beloved son with the reality of alleged actions that compromise safety and trust? As internal deliberations continued, the palace reportedly prepared for every possible scenario. Contingency plans were updated, security protocols reinforced, and legal frameworks examined. Advisors anticipated media reactions, international scrutiny, and public sentiment. The pressure was immense, and the emotional stakes could not be overstated. Every decision had to account for both immediate risk and long-term implications. And then, the first internal confirmation arrived. Investigators reportedly traced key pieces of sensitive information directly to communications believed to be from Harry. It was a turning point, confirming that the alleged breaches were not hypothetical. They were real, tangible, and potentially dangerous. The palace, for the first time, had to confront the true scale of the crisis. What came next would ripple through every corner of Buckingham Palace. Staff, advisors, and family members alike braced for revelations that no one could have anticipated, developments that would test loyalty, challenge assumptions, and force decisions that could alter the monarchy forever. But what investigators discovered in the next phase, the exact nature of the security breaches and the potentially international consequences, would push the crisis into uncharted territory. And no one saw it coming. It wasn't just gossip, rumor, or sensational headlines anymore. According to investigators, the alleged leaks by Prince Harry had reached a level that could have compromised the very security protocols designed to protect the royal family. Every itinerary, every private movement, every subtle detail about personnel placement was suddenly in the hands of outsiders. The palace, trained to handle crises with composure, was facing an unprecedented threat, a security breach originating from within its own walls. Imagine the implications. Security teams had meticulously planned every royal engagement, ensuring that every route, every timing, every protocol minimized risk. These were not arbitrary measures. They were the product of decades of experience, careful coordination with intelligence agencies, and an acute understanding of threats ranging from public disruption to international terrorism. And yet, investigators allege, a prince who had been entrusted with this knowledge may have disclosed sensitive elements to parties with unclear motives. The first signs of the breach were subtle. Security advisors noticed anomalies in communications, small inconsistencies in the deployment of personnel, and questions raised by foreign intelligence partners. These were not yet catastrophic failures, but red flags. Each anomaly had to be analyzed in painstaking detail. Who had access to what? What information could have been intercepted? Were there patterns suggesting deliberate disclosure rather than simple oversight? Investigators reportedly discovered that some of the leaked details were highly actionable. Locations of private residences, planned travel routes, and specific timing of public appearances were among the items allegedly disclosed. To an average observer, these might seem trivial, but to trained analysts, even minor deviations or public knowledge of such details could compromise safety. A prince's movements, once considered untouchable, had potentially been rendered predictable. The ripple effect was immediate. Palace security reviewed contingency plans, adjusted deployment schedules, and implemented emergency protocols to mitigate potential risks. International partners, especially those responsible for security during overseas visits, were briefed, and sensitive adjustments were made to protect members of the royal family. What had started as a domestic breach now had global ramifications. Sources described the emotional tension within security teams. Personnel accustomed to unwavering trust and adherence to protocol were now forced to operate in an environment of uncertainty. The human cost was palpable. Fear, frustration, and disbelief permeated the halls of the palace. Staff questioned how one of their own could allegedly compromise systems they had spent years perfecting. Every action, every oversight, every interaction suddenly carried immense weight. And yet, Harry's public persona remained unaffected, or so it seemed. To the world, he continued to attend engagements, release statements, and maintain his media presence. To the palace, however, his alleged actions were not just breaches of protocol, they were betrayals of trust. The contradiction was stark, a prince adored for charisma and leadership, potentially endangering the very institution that nurtured him. How could someone so aware of the responsibilities of royalty act in ways that undermined them? Investigators also examined the timing of the breaches. Many coincided with periods when Harry and Meghan were actively negotiating independence from royal duties. Was this coincidence, or was it calculated to maximize impact? Some suggest that releasing information at specific moments could have influenced media narratives, public opinion, or even internal palace decision-making. The implications are chilling. If true, it was not merely carelessness, it was strategic. One surprising element uncovered during the investigation involved digital traces. Even with encryption and deleted communications, forensic analysis revealed patterns suggesting premeditation. Messages sent, files accessed, and minor anomalies in network logs all pointed toward awareness of scrutiny. The evidence hinted at an understanding of how information might be traced, implying not a mistake, but intentional risk-taking. Security breaches also extended to foreign domains. Some communications allegedly contained information about international travel plans, meetings with dignitaries, and private engagements abroad. Foreign intelligence teams, initially brought in for consultation, began active monitoring, concerned that details could be exploited for political or personal gain. What began as an internal crisis had now escalated to a potential international security concern. Within the palace, the emotional toll was extraordinary. Advisors and security personnel were forced to reconcile personal feelings with professional responsibility. How do you confront a family member when their alleged actions place lives at risk? How do you balance love and loyalty with the necessity of protecting both people and protocols? The strain on relationships, morale, and trust was unprecedented. Meanwhile, the media narrative continued to swirl. Publicly, Harry remained the charming, rebellious prince, a figure both admired and critiqued. Privately, however, the palace was dealing with the implications of compromised security, potential vulnerabilities, and a future where previously trusted protocols could no longer be assumed secure. The duality of public perception versus private reality became a defining element of the crisis. Investigators reportedly found that even small details, when pieced together, could expose larger patterns. Every message, every disclosed itinerary, and every inadvertent comment was a puzzle piece in a larger, more dangerous picture. The palace was no longer merely responding to leaks. It was attempting to anticipate the consequences of breaches that may have already set events in motion. As the investigation deepened, questions about motive and intent became central. Was this the reckless action of a frustrated son seeking autonomy? Or was there a calculated strategy to influence